Now let's look at managing a dividend portfolio. I'm going to go over to the portfolio tab here. And just to start off with, I'm going to show you how easy it is to go and import one. To do that, I just click on New Portfolio, and we're going to use a transactional portfolio here. The great thing is that we actually have an AI system where you can just drag in your files, your transaction files, and they'll automatically be uploaded and automatically processed. So you don't really have to do any of the formatting, or you don't have to go into Excel and mess around with it. It will all just do it for you. I say this is like the live demo, but yes, it should work. And this works for thousands of transactions. Right? The example I'm using hasn't got too many, but you can have thousands and thousands of transactions, and this will work. And it also works multi-currency. So if you've got accounts across in different locations, we'll pull that in, and we'll also put it all into one currency for you in terms of the aggregate view. So we do that as well. Okay, so that's been imported. Let's review it. Well, that looks good. So I'm going to go and save. It's called transactions, but I could change that name if I wanted to. So just to start off with, I've just imported my portfolio here, and I'm just in the holdings view. I'm just in the kind of overview. So I'll just quickly run you through a few of the things here, just so we kind of get familiar. We've got our equity curve here. We've got the total value of the portfolio. This is an important number, which is your sort of annualized return. So however long you've had the portfolio when you started transacting, we'll actually calculate that properly, which is really powerful, because you can then use that to benchmark how you're doing over the years, not just between two points in time. We've got unrealized and realized returns. That's just when you've sold a company, it becomes realized. When you haven't sold it yet, it's unrealized. And your total dividends over the life of the portfolio, which is different, of course, to what we have here, which is your estimated dividends. I mentioned earlier when we were looking at the analysis that actually using the forecast dividends where available is much more powerful, because then you've actually got the analysts saying, oh, this is where we think the payments are going to go. And that's what we're using here in the estimated dividends, is when we have forecasts, we're going to use that. And this is a much better number than you're going to see elsewhere, because everyone else just uses historical. And as you know, there's a lot of companies where it might be quite well known the dividend is going to grow, going to increase, but also there may be companies where the analysts are saying that we're quite confident that this dividend is going to be cut. So this is a really powerful number, and that's probably the best one to look at when you're looking at how much is this portfolio expected to make. You can see the holdings down here. Well, we just imported those, so we don't need to look at those. And we have our returns tab. The returns tab is where we're doing all the sort of detailed calculations behind those numbers. These are the same breakdown that I just showed you. And if you go down, you'll see that you got obviously every stock here and the summary for each stock. But I can then actually go and click on one of these, and I can see all of the dividend payments that will show up here. And not only that, if there's any stock splits, they'll show up there as well. Let's go to the dividends tab next. I think that's the big one. So this number in the dividends tab here, this is the same number that I just mentioned. This is the kind of forecasted one. Now we here are forecasting for the next 12 months, like sort of imminently what can be expected. But actually in this tab, we're going out even further than that. You'll notice we're actually going up to 3 years. And that's because I mentioned that actually the analysts generally do forecast out to 3 years. And even if there's no analysts, we've got the trajectory of the growth. We know the dividend growth, so we can even use that if the analysts haven't given any forecast. So we can actually kind of forecast pretty well where those dividend payments might end up. And the coloring here is very simple. It's basically based on the snowflake. So anything that's getting more than 4 out of 6 is going green. Anything in the middle is going to be orange, and then anything which is scoring really badly is going to be, less than 2 is going to be red. Well, there's no red ones in this portfolio, but just as an example, it makes it really easy to see how your dividends are going to grow, but also what's the quality of those dividends. And if something changes, it will show up as red here. And not only that, we'll see in a second, you can go into your updates tab and see when you'll get an update when something's changing, but we'll cover that in a moment. This is the actual payments. So what we're looking at so far is annualized. It's looking over the entire year. But in terms of actual payments, what we're doing here is actually we have this is like a teal color, which is when the payment is declared. The company has actually said, we are going to pay this dividend. And then we've got the pink color, which is where it's been estimated. Estimated usually is something that we will do based on the prior payments from the company and also the forecast, as I said. So this is the same data that's going into the number above, but just with much more detail. And so you can see here that you can go month on month. I can click on any of these and I can see in that given month what are the estimated payments, and when those are being declared, they'll show up as declared. So this is just really great if you really want to get granular into what am I actually going to get paid in which month. And the last one I'll just point out here, which is useful for some people, yield on cost. We talked about yield on cost earlier, and it's a really useful metric. The reason the yield on cost on this portfolio is so high is because this portfolio has done well, and some of the companies in this portfolio were bought a very long time ago. And so of course the yield on cost is high. That's what we already went through. So the next one I want to show you is the updates tab, which is over here. And the updates tab is where we're going to capture anything that's changing with any of the stocks in your portfolio. You can come back to this tab and check on it whenever you want, but we will also send you an email alert when one of these that's important has happened, so you'll get that straight away. And if you have our mobile app, you'll get a push notification. But as a dividend investor, the one that's probably going to be most interesting to me is the dividends section. And these are the normal announcements that you're going to get, but we're just going to give you a feed, and this is the dividend may have been confirmed, increased, decreased, anything like that. It's going to be in here. Other ones that are also pretty interesting though for dividend investors would be, of course, your earnings updates, but even new risks to the company will show up here. So anything on those risk checks that I showed earlier, they'll show up here and you get that alert. So this is a really powerful section just to see what's happening, and we'll touch on narratives at the end. But when narratives are being updated, or there's any new narratives on the companies that you own, you'll see them here. The last tab I want to show you is the analysis one, and we'll go from analysis. There's a lot in here, so we're not going to go into every item, but we're going to go to the dividends part, just because I think that this is actually this is really interesting. First of all, we looked at the estimated yield of the portfolio, and there's a lot of calculations going into the estimated yield. But if you just want to see the current yield of the portfolio and how that's doing, you can do that. You can that's a funny thing, but you can do that here. So you can see that actually this portfolio is only yielding 3.1%, which is actually means it's mostly being made up of those type 2 companies. It's not a 7-8% yielding portfolio. And this here is the aggregate, so the sort of weighted average of the dividend growth rate. So every dividend company in your portfolio, we're going to weight the growth rate, which we looked at earlier when we were screening. And we're going to show how is your portfolio growing compared to the market. And here's what's interesting is we're also looking at the US market, or whichever market you're in, average. So you can actually see, are your companies growing dividends at the same rate as everyone else? And it's actually powerful because you can even see with this portfolio, it's actually not quite meeting the average, which would imply there's other companies out there that are growing even faster. And I showed you earlier how to go and screen for that. Lastly, of course, you've got payout ratio. This again is the weighted average payout ratio for your portfolio. So you can just see overall how much of your earnings are being paid out as a dividend. And the last tab I'm going to show you is narratives. Narratives is just such a powerful way to make decisions on any stock. It doesn't have to be dividends or growth stock, but narratives is such a great way to make those decisions. And with the dividend stock, as I mentioned, it really should still be part of your process. It would be very dangerous just to be buying a company, completely ignoring whether this company actually has some kind of story, some kind of something that's going to keep it either alive or hopefully even better than alive, growing into the future. And narratives is the best way to do that. So I've just imported this portfolio, and so the narratives that you're seeing here are just sort of the default ones that have been selected, and often we'll select the narratives that we create based on the analysts that cover the company. But you can go in and override that and choose your own one. So I could go into here and I could go select, and I can see that I can actually choose between the one here, which is from the analysts, but I can also choose, I could use a discounted cash flow value, or I could choose one from one of our users. And once I set that, that's going to set my fair value. So let's, for example, let's for some reason, if you were setting this one, it will be strange because it will be below the value that you own. But once I set that fair value, I've now assigned that to the stock, and that's what I'm going to track. So, you know, like I said, when you're looking at these companies, ideally you really would expect that the fair value is at least above the price, because that's at least, you, like I said, you at least want those companies to have some upside. Even if you're going for type 3 companies, you still want there to be at least some upside in the fair value. Otherwise, it's almost certainly going to erode some of that capital value. And so that's the best way to do it. And like I said, once you choose those narratives, we're going to keep you up to date. You can see here whenever the narrative changes, we'll let you know, and we'll let you know why it's changed. So it's a really, really kind of game-changing way to manage a portfolio.